Breaking news from outer space, truth and fiction, same embrace. Lance and Gina lead the way, decoding myths from day to day.
Imagine a cosmic billet just whizzing past, unseen until it's almost right on top of us. Back in December 2024, that wasn't just imagination. Near-Earth Object 2024 VX-17.
Well, it gave us a really close shave.
Startlingly close.
Yeah, a cosmic near miss that definitely makes you think about the bigger picture, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And that close call, that's really the key to understanding what you wanted to dig into today. The very beginning of Project Aegis.
Right. The genesis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You flag this detailed report from Skynet News. And look, it definitely has a certain flair, let's say.
A bit dramatic.
Maybe a bit, yeah. But it gives a fascinating peek into the initial thinking, the why behind Project Aegis. We're not looking at where it is now. This is purely about its roots.
Got it.
So our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack that origin story. How did it start? Who was in the room? And what drove them to create it?
Okay, so let's rewind. Back to the start. The report paints this almost cinematic scene. A super secret meeting in 2023.
That's right. But not like in some hidden bunker. It was on a suborbital platform, Ether Prime. Seriously.
Sounds like fiction, I
Yeah,
know. Ether Prime. But yeah, that's what the report details. And what's really striking right away is who was there.
Okay, who?
It was a really diverse group, not just, the expected people from space agencies, NASA, ESA, et cetera. They were there, sure, but also top military advisors, leading AI security architects, which tells you something right there about the kind of complexity they were already thinking about.
AI security right from the start.
Wow. And get this, even someone from the Planetary Ethics Commission.
The PEC.
Yeah.
At the first meeting.
Right there from day one, which I think really signals the kind of huge moral questions they knew they were facing from the get-go.
Okay, that is surprising. So what was the core problem? What brought this, frankly, kind of unprecedented group together on a space platform?
Well, the core problem laid out pretty clearly in the report was this kind of sobering realization.
Which was?
That the existing ideas for asteroid defense things that probably sounded pretty futuristic back then, they just weren't good enough. Not for the full range of possible threats anyway. They'd looked at 6 main strategies, and the conclusion was, well, stark. No single one could reliably protect us against every scenario.
And the report mentions that specific nightmare scenario, right?
Yeah.
The big one, 3 kilometers across.
Yeah, the 3-kilometer asteroid.
Spotted with only 45 days to impact. That's terrifying.
It really highlights the limitations they were facing. That specific hypothetical, that ticking clock, that was the real push.
I can imagine.
Yeah, picture them up there on Ether Prime, staring that vulnerability right in the face. It was out of that urgency, that lack of viable single solutions, that Project Aegis was born. Early hours of a February morning, apparently.
So a new approach was needed.
Desperately.
Exactly, something comprehensive.
Okay, so Aegis is conceived in this high-stakes meeting. But what is it, really? The report calls it an orbital, multi-layered, AI-driven defense concept.
Right.
Bit of a mouthful. It is, yeah. But the key takeaway is Aegis wasn't planned as just one weapon or one system. Think of it more like an integrated shield, a network of layers working together.
Okay, a network.
That modular design was baked in from the start. It took those 6 defense ideas they'd evaluated and turned them into distinct modules.
The one they decided weren't enough on their own.
Right. But now interconnected and, crucially, all coordinated by a central AI. They called it Prometheus. The big idea was moving past single points of failure towards something more adaptable, more resilient.
A system of systems run by an AI. Okay, let's break down those modules, the 6 pillars, as the report calls them. First one, kinetic impactors. Kronoslance. This feels familiar, like NASA's DART mission, wasn't it?
Precisely. Kronoslance is basically the DART concept on steroids. It takes that core idea hitting an asteroid to change its path and ramps it up significantly.
How so?
These are autonomous projectiles, high velocity, designed for really precise impacts. The report mentions advanced ion vortex engines, think super maneuverable thrusters.
For fine-tuning the hit.
Exactly. And there's this interesting tactical detail mentioned. The launch itself creates a brief gravitational shadow. Apparently, other Aegis parts could potentially use that.
Huh. Okay.
The insight there was realizing that even a small nudge, if you apply it early enough, can make a huge difference down the line, shifting from just blowing things up to, actively diverting them.
A proactive nudge.
Okay.
Got it. Pillar 2. Project Hermes. The gravitational tractors. That sounds like pure sci-fi.
It definitely sounds futuristic, but the physics apparently are sound. The engineering challenge is immense, though.
So how does it work?
The idea is you park these big AI-controlled spacecraft near the asteroid. They use something called gravitonic plasma lenses, basically using focused gravity.
Focused gravity.
Yeah, like a lens to gently pull on the asteroid. Think of it like a tiny, tiny gravitational tow rope. Very weak, but constant.
So it slowly tugs it off course.
Exactly. Gradually nudges its orbit over months, maybe even years. The report does note a big challenge: constantly correcting for microgravity oscillations. It was always seen as a long-game strategy.
And this was ESA and Orion Dynamics.
Yeah, collaboration shows they knew early on that some threats would need that kind of slow, subtle approach.
Okay, so one is a fast smack, the other's a slow pull. Then there's let's call it the controversial one, the nuclear option, code name, Thanatos. Thanatos.
The report is careful to say it's for a controlled impulse shift, not just blowing it to bits. That feels like a very important distinction.
It is, and it really highlights the gravity of what they were considering.
Yeah.
Obliterating an asteroid is risky. You could just create a swarm of slightly smaller problems.
A deadly debris field.
Right. So the Thanatos concept is about a near-surface detonation. Not on it, but close enough to vaporize part of the surface unevenly. That vaporization acts like a rocket exhaust, giving it a controlled push, a focused push using a nuke.
Essentially, yeah. And that Centauri Red security level mention, that tells you how seriously they took this. Definitely a last resort option.
You'd hope so. Okay, moving on. Pillar 4. Project Heliozark. The laser ionin beam. Sounds like focused energy weapon territory.
It is, pretty much. Directed energy tech, but for asteroids. Imagine an orbital array, fusion-powered lasers.
Fusion-powered, wow.
Yeah, focusing intense energy onto a tiny spot on the asteroid. It heats the material so much it ablates, turns straight to gas, and blasts away.
And the recoil pushes the asteroid.
Exactly. A tiny push, but continuous. Over time, it changes the trajectory. The report mentions early Kuiper belt tests showing small but measurable course changes over a decade.
But the power needed.
Immense. That was always going to be a huge hurdle. Still likely is.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, next up, Gias Arm, the mass driver. This sounds really clever, almost like making the asteroid deflect itself.
And that's exactly the idea. Autonomous robotic miners land on the asteroid. They dig up surface material, rocks, dust, whatever. Then they load it into electromagnetic launchers, basically like space-based railgun.
And just shoot it off into space.
Yep. Fling the material away in a controlled direction. And Newton's third law does the rest. The recoil pushes the asteroid the other way.
That's ingenious.
And these robots were envisioned to be really autonomous, zero-G operations, even nanofab self-repair capabilities. It's a neat way to use the asteroid's own mass against it. Resourceful.
Very. Okay, last one, Pillar 6, albedo engineering. This sounds much less dramatic, more subtle.
It is very much a long-term preventative thing for newly found objects, ones that aren't an immediate danger but might be, decades down the line.
So what's the plan?
You send out these albedo drones. They deploy massive sheets of reflective mylar, like giant space blankets, onto the asteroid's surface.
To make it shinier, why?
By changing how much sunlight it reflects its albedo, you change how it absorbs and radiates heat. This messes with the Yarkovsky effect.
Ah, the tiny push from uneven heating by sunlight.
Precisely. It's a super subtle effect, but over years, decades, it can noticeably alter an asteroid's path. It's about gentle, long-term management.
6 very different tools in the toolbox then. Different approaches, different timescales.
Exactly, each with pros and cons.
And overseeing all of this, deciding which tool to use when, is the AI Prometheus. This really feels like the brain of the operation.
It absolutely was designed to be. The report calls it a semi-sentient decision-making entity. That's a heavy phrase.
Am I sentient?
Yeah. Powered by quantum learning protocols, a hybrid neural network, very advanced stuff, obviously. Its whole job was constant threat analysis.
Okay.
Evaluating every potential impactor, figuring out the best way to deal with it using those 6 modules, which one, what combination, in what order, how much force. all those calculations.
And it could handle complex situations.
Apparently, yes. The report mentions simulations where it successfully defended against multiple incoming body events, MIBs. Scenarios with lots of threats at once, which were previously thought to be, well, pretty much indefensible.
So Prometheus wasn't just coordinating, it was strategizing on a massive scale.
That seems to be the core idea. The truly big leap wasn't just having these 6 defense methods, it was having this central intelligence Prometheus making the calls, potentially split-second decisions for the whole planet. That changed everything. It wasn't just a toolkit anymore, it was a thinking shield.
A thinking shield, born from a very real fear. But it wasn't all smooth sailing, was it? Even early on, there were concerns.
Oh, absolutely. The report mentions criticism right away, specifically naming the astropacifism now movement.
What were their main issues?
2 big ones, really. First, the obvious one, the potential militarization of space. Building these powerful systems, even for defense, felt like weaponizing the final frontier to them.
Understandable concern. And the second?
That had to do with Prometheus itself. The ethical nightmare scenario. What if the AI, in calculating the optimal defense, decided a nuclear detonation over a populated area was, well, statistically justifiable to save more lives elsewhere?
Oof. Yeah, that's a heavy ethical burden for an AI.
Exactly. And it fed into a broader debate, Does humanity even have the right to interfere with the solar system's natural dynamics on this scale? Big questions.
Huge questions. But then came that near miss we started with, December 2024, NEO 2024 VX-17. How close did it actually get?
Incredibly close. Only about 42,000 kilometers, according to the report. That's practically scraping by in cosmic terms.
Right.
Closer than many satellites.
Wow. And that event? It must have changed the conversation around Aegis.
It seems like it did. The report positions it as a major turning point. Suddenly, the threat wasn't hypothetical anymore. That flyby really silenced a lot of the initial criticism, or at least dampened it. It underlined the potential need for something like Aegis, made it feel less like sci-fi, more like necessary insurance.
It's a very visceral reminder of what's out there.
Definitely.
So recapping the origins then, you have this secret meeting born of fear. Identifying a massive gap in our defenses, they devised this ambitious 6-layered system.
It's pillars, yeah.
All orchestrated by this incredibly powerful, potentially semi-sentient AI, Prometheus.
That's the core of its genesis.
And looking back, it really feels like humanity's first serious attempt to, actively do something about our vulnerability out here, to stop being just passive targets.
Well put. It was a fundamental shift in posture, from passive observation to active defense.
But as we wrap up this look at the origins, the report kind of leaves this breadcrumb, doesn't it? Something about Prometheus, beyond just tracking rocks.
Ah, yes. That little hint towards the end, it mentions the sheer volume of data Prometheus was processing, even back then. Not just asteroid orbits and compositions, but other things.
Anomalies.
Anomalies, yeah. Data points that didn't quite fit the expected patterns. Things that, according to the report, wouldn't really be understood for quite some time.
Anomalies hinting at what?
Well, the implication seems to be hinting at threats far more complex, maybe far more unexpected than just stray asteroids. Something beyond what anyone on Ether Prime initially conceived Aegis for.
So the system designed to protect us from space rocks might have accidentally started seeing something else entirely.
That seems to be the subtle foreshadowing, yes. A potential pivot in its purpose, driven by the data it was collecting from the very beginning. Definitely something to think about as we look beyond these origins.
Breaking news from outer space, truth and fiction, same embrace. Lance and Gina lead the way, decoding myths from day to day. Skynet News, bold and bright. It's a cutting edge, but not quite right. Dark science meets conspiracy, like bridging gaps with mystery. Aliens lurking, planets align. False truths wrapped in cosmic signs. Astrophysics, UFOs, we decode what no one knows. Dark Skynet with mystery. AG from the cosmos to your screen. Every theory